In this video, we're going to discuss basic materials within Maya. The two types of materials that we're going to be discussing are procedural, which they're the ones that you can create within Maya, and then there is image-based, which is the type of materials that you have to kind of bring in from outside sources to be able to map them into Maya. We're also going to be talking about the rendering current frame tab button here, and also the display render settings, okay, which is this button right here. So let's talk about procedural materials. And again, these are materials that you can create within Maya, and you don't need outside sources for it. Now, when you create anything in Maya, it already has a material assigned to it. All right. If I select this wall that I have right here for this building, we're gonna see again channel box, which is usually the attributes of this object. All right, and we can usually see more here, but this one is an object that it's either a copy of, I already deleted the history of it. But to see an extension of the attributes that usually come in an object, you have to either go into the attribute editor by just clicking a tab here, or by clicking on the show hide attribute editor, which should be the third button from your left here at the top. Okay, so just click on that one. Alright, and let's just turn it back on. Alright. So this default Lambert material you're gonna see within your attribute editor. So any material that you assign to any object within Maya, you're gonna be able to find in the attribute editor, usually at the last tab. All right. Now, like I said, by default, Maya assigns this Lambert material, and basically what this is just again a default material that doesn't have any specularity to it. So there's very little that you can do with this material, because it's kind of flat by nature and not very interesting. So if you want to create different type of materials to assign them to different objects, you have to go to the Hypershade, which you can find under Window, Render Editor, and then going into Hypershade. Alright. Now, within the Hypershade, you can find different type of materials. And again, if we look at our windows here, you can see that this box right here under materials, it gives you kind of like a preview of basically what the material is. And this is the Lambert one that we've been discussing right here. So anything that it's within the scene, you're going to be able to find here in this box. Okay. Now, if you want to create new materials, if we look here on our left over here, there's going to be a list of default materials, again, that are kind of procedurally created within Maya. Alright, but let's just concern ourselves with, again, with the two basic ones, which is the Lambert, which again, it's a flat material that you can't do much with it, and then probably one of the most commonly used materials that you can find, which is the blend. Alright, so to create a blend material, I'm just going to click on this. Alright, but just by clicking on it, there's going to be one appearing right here in a box. Alright, now again, notice that no changes have happened in our scene, and it's because we need to take this material and assign it to the actual object. To do this, you can do two different things. You can middle mouse, select the material, and just drag it into the object, or you can right click on the object, and again, I'm right clicking. You can't really see the hotbox here, but I'm having a couple of options appearing around my material here, and one of them is assign material to selection, so I'm just going to click on that. Alright, and again, I have a warning here telling me that there's no renderable objects because it wasn't selected. So you need to make sure you select the object, right click on the material, and then assign to selection. Okay, and again, notice that there was a difference or some change happening in our scene. And again, this should give you a good idea of the difference between what a Lambert material, which again is this gray default that appears to any object that we create, and then the blend. Alright. And again, the main characteristic on the blend is that you can create specularity. And if I select the object again, I just assign it to this, and then I go into the attribute editor, you're going to be able to find a blend tab, which is the material that we just assigned. Okay, and within this material, again, you can do a couple of kind of different things depending on what you're trying to do. And again, you can kind of come in here and kind of customize your setting just to kind of give your material a certain feel. All right, and again, the idea is that for instance, if you want to make plastic or glass or something like that, you can play with the settings here just to try and kind of simulate that. All right. So if we go here into the common attributes, we're going to again, if you click on the color, you can just kind of click here and just select a different color if you want to. Again, this is supposed to be like a brick wall or something like that. So notice that we're adding a little bit of color to our scene. Transparency, again, if you by default it's a black, but if you move this tab and it goes onto white, it's going to make it more and more transparent. Okay. And let's see, the ambient color, again, it usually kind of gives it if you have this kind of orange brick and you want to give a little bit of ambient sort of different color kind of on top of it, it just you can kind of add it to it, and it just kind of depends on how bright it is. So probably want to leave this black for now. And incandescence, again, just it's basically the self-illumination of the object. So if you kind of bring all this all the way up, it's just going to make it bright and very saturated. Okay. Now, bump mapping we're going to be talking about in a second. Let's jump into the specular shading, and again, that's basically where one of the great thing about this material is that you can add specular shading. Now, things in the real world are, even though not everything's shiny and not everything's specular and super specular and not everything has reflection, things tend to have a little bit of specularity and a little bit of reflection by default. Okay. So these are kind of the settings that you'll have to play with in order to kind of replicate some of that. And again, the eccentricity just kind of you can see in the preview what it's doing to our specularity. All right. Alright, and again, by lowering the eccentricity, we're kind of localizing that specularity to a certain point. You can also kind of you can use a specular roll off to just kind of not make it as bright. Okay, as you can see in the preview here, you can change the color of that specularity if you want to. Alright. So again, you can make the specularity be green if you want to. By default, let's just kind of stick to white. The reflectivity, again, objects by default have a little bit of kind of reflectivity assigned to them, and even in the real world. But for something like a brick wall, it's probably not going to be that predominant. So we're going to keep this very, very low. So let's just do something like this, and again, we're going to be testing these materials to see what they're doing. And you can also kind of change the color of the reflection. Okay. Now, the thing about procedural materials is that they're pretty useful if you're trying to do something, let's say like a window or something like that. But if we're trying to do a brick wall, there's really not much that a flat, not necessarily a flat color, but what a single color would do for this, which is why we're gonna have to bring an image-based texturing for this. But let's just use another kind of blend material to let's just give some texture to our windows. Okay. Which again, procedural materials are perfect for that, because you can create them within the program, and it's not something that you can really simulate by just finding a picture online of what you want the glass to look like. So I'm going to start by selecting all the objects that I want to have this kind of window material that I'm going to create. Okay, and again, I kind of made a little mistake here on the selection, so let me just go in here, select all the parts one more time. Okay, and again, for this orange, kind of orangey browny material is going to be the brick, so we need to create a new material for the window. Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, we're sticking to our two default ones that we're kind of talking about, one being the Lambert, which has no reflectivity, it's or specularity is pretty a flat boring color, and the blend, which you can use to kind of simulate a lot of materials. So I'm just going to click on the blend one more time, and again it's going to create another blend right here for me. And again, all these windows got deselected again. Just going to go ahead and select them one more time real quick. Okay, and the idea is that this blend 2 is going to be the materials that are going to go for this specific windows. So again, I just right clicked on the material, and as you can see, there was a little bit of change on the windows. Again, the attributes of the material you can find two ways. If I select an object that has the material on it and I go to the attribute editor, it's going to be right there. So this is the blend 2 window material. But I can also find it if I just go into my Hypershade and I click on the material. It's going to take me right to the attributes of this object. Okay. So again, we're going to change the materials here for our window here. We're going to make this maybe a little bit off-white here. Okay. Again, forgot to select this one right here, so I'm just going to add it real quick. Okay, and again, the attribute of this windows is that they're, see-through. So if I again select any of these objects, going to the blend 2 here, again, we can just go in here and rename our object just to kind of keep things a little organized. All right. So we change the color. We're gonna have to increase the opacity here, or transparency. And again, notice that it's gone from being a solid object to something you can kind of see through it. Alright. And again, then from there, we're gonna go into the specular shading and make it more specular, like like pieces of glass are. Just kind of play with the settings. Okay, again, when you're just learning the program, you just kind of have to kind of play around with the settings and get familiar and see what they do and stuff like that. And again, we probably want this to be pretty reflective, so I'm gonna do a reflectivity of 1. Alright, so now that we have a material here for our window, probably want to add that kind of brick material to this rather than kind of keep it as is. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and assign an image-based material to this wall right here. All right, and it's the way to do that. Okay, and again, let me just kind of go in here and call this wall or bricks maybe. Okay, and again, I got to this material by selecting my object here, and it's part of my attribute editor. Okay, so if I want to assign a material to this brick, because again, the procedural alone is not going to do the work, because it's supposed to look like that. All right, so one of the things that you can do again is find something that looks like what you want to assign to this piece of geometry. Okay, so if you go online and you do a research for do a search for brick wall texture. Okay, and the thing about textures also, when you're starting, that's very important that they're tileable. Okay, so again, I've kind of gone and I found this texture online. And what I mean by tileable is that basically if I were to repeat this texture multiple times, it'll look seamless. Alright, so how do you test that? Or how do you kind of make one, even if that's where you're going to go? So again, this is Adobe Photoshop. Okay, and if I was going to test if a material is tileable, again, that I can repeat it seamlessly a lot of times, I would go into filter, other, and then go to offset. Alright, and you probably want to increase, again, nothing too crazy, and I just increased it by 50. So it basically it took part of this side and placed it here. Same thing with the top. Alright, part of here and place it on top. And as you can see, you can't really tell that that this is that anything happened to this texture. And again, it's because it's tileable. It's because if I assign it as a texture, I'm going to be able to repeat it many times. Okay, so now that I have my tileable texture, again, the next thing I want to do, it's make sure that I place it in a location that I can find it within your folder structure, the one that you created with your project. I usually like to make sure that they are with my with source images. Okay, that means, and again, you want to place it within your folder structure so that way Maya knows where to find it next time you open it. Because the thing about image-based textures is that you can't just bring them into Maya and then it'll kind of be, the information won't be baked into the object. Okay. What Maya and a lot of kind of other 3D packages do is that whatever you bring into here is being referenced from a specific location. So again, let's just go ahead and assign this. All right. And again, we're gonna be using our source images to be location to find a texture for this. And again, just to reiterate, Maya needs to be able to find where these are. So you want to put your textures within a folder that this file already has that can reference. All right, so because he knows it's going to be there next time you open your Maya, it's going to be looking for your texture in that exact location. So to assign an image-based texture to this wall, I'm going to go into color here. All right, and I'm going to click on this checker box right here. All right, and I click on that, and I'm going to get this new box called the Create Render Node. When you do that, you can do a couple of different things. All right, one of them is assign procedural maps that you can use also to to assign to these objects. But I'm going to stick to actually, again, bringing an image, an outside source to be able to texture this object. So to do that, I'm going to click on File. Alright, and when I do that, what it's going to do is going to create another node or another tab here under my attributes. Alright, now notice that it's kind of treating it as its own thing, but because again, it just says File 1, place texture 2D, texture 1 here. Okay, and again, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but I just want you to know that again, if you click on your object here, all right, if we're looking at the bricks texture here, again, this used to be a orange color. Basically, by assigning a texture node, you pretty much kind of overrode all that information that was there before. Okay, now notice that instead of the checker box, you have a box with a little bit of an arrow, and what this does is that it's going to take you to what that image node that you just created is. Okay, so again, when you assign it, it's going to take you directly to it, but if for some reason you click out, you're going to be able to get to it by clicking on this arrow with a box right here. So if I click on it, it's going to take me to that node that it created to be able to assign a texture to this. Alright, so you're going to have a couple options here. The one that we're going to be looking at here, it's image name. Alright, right next to this kind of empty box, there is a folder. Go ahead and click on that, and when you click on it, it's going to take you to the source images of your folder. And again, it seems like I have a couple ones here. Okay. So again, you just have to know what it is that what you're looking for here. So make sure you keep your textures labeled. And this red brick diffuse right here, this is the one that I have in open with my Photoshop, and I made sure that it was tileable. And again, this is just a texture that I found online. If you're gonna find your textures online, just make sure that they have enough resolution for them to look good in Maya. If you find something that's too low res, it's gonna look pixelated and bad. So if you can find some free source resources online, just make sure that they hide res so they look good in your object. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the red brick right here, which is the texture that I found online, and click on open. Alright, and one of the things that you're seeing right here is that there's really nothing changed within our object. We click on it and we go into our bricks node here. Alright, and as you can see on the preview, there is a brick texture happening here, but it's not appearing on our viewport. All right, and that's because we don't have it set to be viewed on our viewport yet. Again, we talked about the different type of views that you can have here. We talked about the shortcuts, the number shortcuts that are above the letter keys. All right, and 4, it's the wireframe. 5, it's this kind of shaded version, but if you want to see textures, you got to click on 6. And again, notice that the texture basically appeared on my wall here. All right, so there's going to be a couple of things that we're going to have to change here. One, again, bricks are not this specular as we can see in our preview, so we're going to have to bring this down a bit. All right, because again, we don't want it to be that to have that much specularity. Now, the second thing that we notice is that these bricks are pretty humongous. All right, so we're gonna need to go in here and kind of scale this down a bit for it to look more natural or real. So I'm gonna go back to my file node here, and again, color. And this symbol usually indicates that there is a node assigned to it, so you got to click on it to know what it is. And again, this is the image that we just brought in. All right, now under file 1 you're gonna see basically attributes that are kind of linked to this image itself, but there's nothing here that gives you the ability to kind of maybe distribute this, because again, one of the reasons we're using a tileable texture is so we can actually multiply it and make it seamless. So Maya also gives, besides the file, which again is just the image, it gives you another node, again place to D texture 1. If you click on it, it's going to give it basically a way for you to be able to kind of redistribute your texture. So if I wanted to kind of repeat this a couple times to make it the right size and also like a seamless brick texture, I will go into my place to D texture 1 and go into repeat UV right here, and I'm gonna just kind of arbitrarily just put 10 here and 10 here. Alright, so what it just did, it basically took that brick texture that I assigned to it and it assigned it both in the U and the V direction 10 times. Alright, and again, remember, by default everything's by ones here, which was too big, but then by going into the file node right next to my file 1, which is the image that I assigned, there is a place to the texture which is going to allow me to redistribute this seamless texture by just increasing the amount of the repeat UV. So I think 10 was a little bit too much. Let's just stick to 8. Alright. So and again, you're gonna see a couple of things going on here. Basically anything that's within our front kind of view kind of they're distributed very well, but we're gonna have some kind of tiling issues on the side here, and we're gonna address this maybe in another video, but let's just kind of stick to this for right now. So we assigned this image texture here. Alright, and then the next thing we want to do is start testing it. We want to see what this looks like. And again, we also have this kind of window texture here. If we wanted to, we could maybe add some of that kind of white wood. Maybe, we don't really have to find a texture for this. Maybe we can just assign a white color for now to just color code it. Again, just to kind of give it a little bit of interest right now. So again, we're just gonna go back to the Hypershade here, and I'm just gonna go into blend. I'm gonna create a new one. Then I'm going to go into the attribute editor, and again, this one's just gonna be pretty much a white, not necessarily white. You never want to use totally white or totally black on something. You usually want to use an off-white and off-black for things like this. Alright. And again, I don't want this material to be too much, because it's wood and it has probably some sort of matte kind of paint assigned to it, so we probably don't want this to be very strong. Reflection, just bringing it down a lot. And I'm just gonna go and assign that same white material to all this white wood. Alright, now an interesting thing is going to happen here, and again, notice that a lot of these objects are kind of instants here, and if I go in here and assign this material to them, notice that it only goes to whatever I selected and not what the instances are doing. And again, one of the thing about instances is that they have a relationship within the sub-object mode of it. So if I go in here and just select the vertices, you're going to see a change from that. But if I'm assigning a texture, or sometimes it doesn't work. And again, it just there is a relationship with the movement and the sub-object mode of it. But when it comes to texture, you kind of have to select it on its own. So again, I just want to go in here and just add a little bit of interest to my scene. So I'm just going to go ahead and assign this kind of white wood material to the things that are supposed to be white in my scene. All right. At least to a couple of them, maybe not everything. Okay. So again, we wanna get an idea of what's happening here with this brick texture, because again, we just kind of assign it, and it's just we need to kind of see what it's doing. So I'm gonna go here into the render the current frame button, and again, you're gonna find it right here, right below your menu, and just when you click on it, you're gonna tell Maya to basically process what's happening on your viewport. All right, because again, what we're seeing here is just a preview. We need to see what's happening. So I'm gonna click on this. All right, and again, it's gonna render what we just kind of created. It's gonna show you basically a difference between what's happening with the image based kind of textures and the procedural based. Again, one of the things that we're going to notice is not a lot of interest in our scene right now, because we have no lights and things like that. But we can get a better idea of how things are looking, and how things are going to end up looking at the end. And again, one of the things that we're seeing here with the bricks is that they're very kind of short, sideways. They don't look very good. So again, we can always kind of go back into our brick texture, and if we go into the node that has the place 2D, which allows us to distribute, we can kind of come here and kind of you can kind of play around with these settings. But sometimes what works better is actually using the UVs of the actual object. All right. And again, Um, again, we're talking about UVs here, and by UV, it's basically um, it's two letters that they're kind of they stand for V. I mean U for horizontal and V for vertical. All right, and it basically it's kind of how Maya kind of distributes um, the texture of an object. Okay, so what you got to think about um, when you're assigning textures in Maya is that it's basically assigning. Uh, let's just say again, just to kind of better explain, I'm going to go to my front viewport here. That's probably not a good idea here. Okay, it's basically taking this geometry, all right, and it's kind of thinking of it as a 2D kind of flat plane, and it's basically putting an image on top of it. All right, so it's not assigning, it's assigning coordinates for its for the vertical and the horizontal, but not for the depth of it, because again, it doesn't, this geometry right here doesn't have any depth to it. So and the reason why you're seeing this right here is because that's the way that it's interpreting, this texture being this 2D texture being on top of something that it's not kind of placed right in the UV. And again, we're going to talk about how you go UV mapping and stuff like that later on, but right now I want to introduce the creating UVs, which again, more than the place 2D texture one node that comes with this to allow you to maybe repeat the UVs, is going to allow you to kind of redistribute the texture a little bit better. So for this right here, I'm going to stick to using a planar mapping. All right. So what it's going to do is basically take this texture, and it's going to give it a way for me to be able to redistribute it with a plane on top of it. And again, if I select this image and I click on planar image, it's going to give me this this new node. All right. And again, it's a control for me to be able to kind of redistribute this texture any way I want to. And again, the idea is that I can kind of make it maybe look a little more natural, because right now the texture is a little bit kind of too short on the white of it. So just by taking this planar mapping and just assigning it to this and redistributing how the texture is being projected on the 2D on the 2D plane, it allows me to be able to kind of scale it any way that I want. All right. And again, that's kind of looking a little bit better right there. All right. And again, if we go into our object and we go to our actual channel box, notice that projection is something that's added to your inputs here, and that's something you can go back to if you ever need to change it, as long as you don't have anything on top of it and things like that. Now, so the other thing that you need to kind of keep in mind right now is that if we decide to change the texture on this object, it basically it's going to keep redistributing it based on this projection that we have assigned to it here. So and that's going to come into play once we assign the next texture. All right. Again, if I go here into my render current frame, one of the things that you're going to notice is that, again, everything it looks very much more better distributed, but it's still very flat. So one of the things that you can use in Maya to kind of add something that this flat a little bit more interest is something called bump mapping. Alright, so let me just go back to my attribute editor so I can go into my bricks. And again, we added this the brick texture on our color here. Now bump mapping, it's literally a 2D illusion that Maya creates when it comes to texturing. And basically what it does is that you assign a texture that's basically the same as this brick texture, but what it does is create an optical illusion of kind of things, of relief, of things kind of being kind of extruded out a little bit based on a black and white image. So I don't have a black and white image bump mapping of this, but I can actually create one in Photoshop. So how would I go about creating one? Well, again, what you want to have is basically anything that's off-white or white. It's basically anything that's going to be kind of popping out. Alright? Anything that's black, you know, kind of gives the illusion like it's kind of going back a little bit. So you want to kind of change the color on this. And again, the idea would be that the bricks are kind of popping out, and then these white areas are kind of going inwards. So we gotta kind of change the colors here a little bit for this to work out. So one of the things that I'm going to do first is going to go into image here in Photoshop. Alright, and then I'm going to select the saturate, and that's basically going to take this image and turn it into a black and white image. Alright, but again, this doesn't, even though the bump mapping kind of works with pretty much shades of gray to be able to work, this doesn't solve a problem, because again, the white areas in between the bricks is what's going to pop out and not necessarily the bricks. So I'm going to go ahead and invert this image by doing Control I. Alright, and again, notice that now the inner parts of the brick, it's the black area, and then the bricks are going to be lighter, so they're going to pop out. And I can also go into adjustments and kind of make this a little bit brighter. Alright, increase the contrast. Alright, so this is a good bump map for me to be able to create a little bit of that kind of relief to the illusion that we can bring into Maya. So I'm going to go into save, do a save as, alright, and I'm going to save it over this red brick bump map, okay, and again, you want to keep your textures labeled, what you label them, you know, as long as you know what they are and somebody else can understand what they are, you can pretty much name them whatever. Alright, so back in 3D in Maya, alright, we're going to go into bump mapping here, alright, and again, just like the color, we have a checker box here. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click on File again, just so I can bring a file node, another file node into this material, and it's going to give me two things. This bump 2D1 right here, alright, and then a file 2, which again, just like the first image we brought, we can actually bring in that 2D image that's for texture. So on this folder, I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to go into, again, my materials, and I'm looking for that bump map that I just created through Photoshop, and then I'm going to open it. Alright, and now you can't really, again, this is just a preview of what's happening in Maya. This just created a bit of a relief on our material, and you can see a little bit here on our preview, but you can't really tell much here, so we're gonna have to go here into a render the current frame and see what it's doing. Alright, so it's a couple of things at play right here. One, this doesn't look very appealing, and two, the thing is, the reason why it's looking like that, it's because we have to change the coordinates of this image the same way we did on the first one, okay? Because they need to match. They're literally the same image, and they're being distributed equally by this UV map, that we applied to it. But if we go into the color and we go into 2D texture, this one's being repeated 8 times. All right. If I go back to this one, and again, notice that this is the file area where I can kind of bring in the image, and we also have a place 2D texture 2 node applied to that bump map, and the repeat UV, it's only at 1. So we're gonna have to change the repeat numbers on this as well. All right, and then I'm gonna click on render. All right, and again, just look at what just happened here. It took and it gave that flat image that I had before more interest by adding an illusion of relief to our texture. All right, and again, even if I render a little bit further away, again, originally we had something flat like we had here, what we have here in our preview, but if we do render, it's going to look a little bit more interesting because it's actually creating relief the same way you would see in actual brick walls. And you can kind of change the amount of that a little bit. If I go again into the bump mapping through my brick texture here, click on this. Alright, well for this is going to be a little tricky, alright? So please call attention to this, because in order to change the amount of relief on this, and again, I'm going to show you another trick here. I'm going to go really close here. I'm going to go here into my render view, alright, and I'm going to do one render. And I basically want to know what changes that I'm going to be doing to my bump map are going to do to this. So for that, I'm going to be using this button here called the region render. Okay, so I'm gonna click on it. All right, and then basically you just kind of have to create a marquee around the area that you want to see updated. All right. So again, and this is going to be pretty helpful if what you're rendering is taking a long time. For something like this, it's not really a big deal, but I just want to show you the render region and just basically how you go about comparing what you're doing and with what's happening before. Because again, this is kind of giving a really nice brick look, but it's looking a little noisy, so we kind of need to fix this up a little bit. So I'm going to again, by selecting this kind of marquee here, then I'm going to go into the bump map here. Alright, and again, notice that we have the file 2D and place 2D texture here that kind of allows us to bring the image and allows us to redistribute it a little bit better. But if we want to change the amount of bump mapping, we have to go to another node that is not visible here, and we do that by clicking on the go to output connection, which are basically arrows within kind of nodes that are connected. So if I click one, it's going to take me to this bump 2D one, and again, it's connected to this, but it's not immediately available. And if I change the depth of the bump mapping, let's just do it by half, then I'm going to click not on this one, because if I click this one, the render current frame view, it's going to basically render the whole frame. I only want to render here so I can see the difference between the two. So now that I have this selected, alright, then I'm going to click on this one, and it's just going to render that little area. And again, the idea is that we're going to be able to start seeing differences between between these two. So again, 0.5 doesn't seem to have done much. Let's just go a little bit lower. So again, the difference is very subtle, but we're starting to see a little less noisiness here. Alright, and again, 0.1 seems to again look a little more natural, but we're gonna have to kind of keep going down and see if we can kind of come up with something a little less noisy. So 0.5 perhaps. Alright, and again, it's looking a lot better, little less noisy on this area as it is here. It's going to look a little more natural. And again, if we want to just kind of see a full preview of this, just click on this one. And now it's kind of looking a lot better and not so noisy. So again, I can kind of go back here a little bit. Alright, and if you click on this one, the open render view, it basically is going to, when you click on it, it's going to show you what you had there before. So, you know, this is not a new render of it. So let's just click on this one more time. And now we're seeing the bricks, and they're not that noisy. Okay. So again, just to show you kind of the differences between what you would do with a procedural texture, probably works a little better for something like glass or plastics or you know, things that don't have a lot of detail. But for something like a brick wall, you need to use image-based texturing, so you can actually create or give it an actual brick wall that will make it look like the actual structure. Alright, so and again, this has just kind of been a quick overview when it comes to the two types of texturing that you can find within Maya. Again, the first one was procedural, which is these kind of materials that you can create within the program. Second one is this image based, which we actually again, it's an image that we find online. We made sure that it was tileable. So again, you know, tileable means that you can repeat it multiple times, and then we were able to redistribute it within our geometry and assign it a bump map to kind of give it a little more interest, so it actually looks like a brick wall. And again, just to show that one more time. Alright, and you know, then based on this, on what I just showed you, I'm gonna kind of go around and keep adding textures to my scene, and the next lesson we'll talk about more on the render settings, again, that you can find here. We're going to talk about render settings, and we're probably going to discuss more about how you go about cleaning up some of these textures. And you know, one of the things with this kind of window material that we created is that again, it has transparency, but it doesn't have any reflection. And again, in the next video, I'm going to tell you why. But for now, again, just kind of get familiar with the materials, know how to kind of bring an image-based material, and all right. Thank you for watching.